Hello everyone, how are you all going? We've had a few more cards revealed for Star Wars Unlimited for the new Twilight of the Republic set coming out in a few months' time in an FFG stream. So we'll have a quick chat about those. Not much to talk about today. There's one card in particular I think might be interesting in terms of constructed play. But before we get into that, I'd like to give a bit of a shout out and a signal boost to the guys over at Onyx Squadron. Now, we don't really have any kind of major large-scale tournaments for Star Wars Unlimited in Australia just yet. Still early days in terms of what FFG is working out to do with that kind of stuff. But this group is putting on Onyx Unlimited. Basically, our bid to show Asmodee and FFG that we can put on larger scale tournaments for these newer games, for Star Wars games in general. If you're not familiar with Onyx Squadron, by the way, they're basically a group of gamers largely involved with the X-Wing community that have been responsible for sort of promoting Australia as a space to host these larger scale tournaments. They're responsible for a lot of great prize support, streaming, all that kind of stuff. I've met them a few times now. It's really fun playing with them, always fun catching up with them. So if you're able to, on the 14th and 15th of September in Canberra, this will be hosted by Small World FLGS. So if you want to help support the game and try and, push FFG to give us bigger tournaments, please come. The numbers are already looking really, really solid. We're still a month out from it. I'll be there and, really excited. So shout out to those guys. And with that, let's have a look at these new cards. Now, I'll go in order from, in my opinion, least hype to most hype. I think all of these are interesting, but as I said, there's one in particular where I think we actually can have some discussion around meta play. First up, let's have a look at General's Blade. This is a 3-cost command trait card. It's an upgrade attached to a non-vehicle unit, and if it's attached to a Jedi on attack, the next unit you play this phase costs 2 less. It's +3/+3. I find this card interesting, but kind of antithetical to the kind of play patterns it seems to be trying to support. Basically every time you attack, you get to make your units cheaper, so the logic here is you're trying to get more units out onto the board. But if you're doing that, you generally don't want to be playing a 3-cost upgrade. There's a bit of an opportunity cost there. Your opponent can just remove your unit once you play it on, and that just feels horrible. Long term, yes, it'll eke out a lot of value by giving you this trigger over and over again, and if you find ways to make the trigger happen multiple times per turn, yes, you can reduce the same unit by a factor of 4 or 6 if you find some shenanigans to do that. I just think realistically the opportunity cost here is going to be a bit punishing in terms of constructed play. Probably pretty decent though in terms of draft. I do like this kind of design. And look, let's just talk about like the magical Christmas land scenario. That'll probably never happen, but it's fun to think about these things. You chuck this on like Mace Windu, he starts to attack and, he's got 10 health now, so he can attack into 9 of your opponent's battle droids. Say you play him, then you play the General's Blade and you swing into 8 of your opponent's battle droids. He'll have 10 health, so you can swing at 1 and then swing at 8 more after you put the upgrade on. You get 8 of these triggers, so you can play like a home 1 and a light cruiser, and you're ambushing half your opponent's board and you're playing stuff out of your discard pile, and you look up and your opponent's halfway down the street having a cup of coffee, and everyone in the store is cheering, and they put like a sash over you that says best player, and then you wake up because this is realistically never going to happen. But it's fun to think about these kinds of things. Just an FYI, probably don't try and build that deck. You'll spend a lot of time looking at lots of very expensive cards and not playing anything. Expensive in terms of in-game cost and real-world cost, so just be mindful of that kind of stuff. A pretty fun fringe card, but I just realistically don't think it's going to be that consistent. Let's move on to Jesse. This is one of the clone dudes, part of Captain Rex's squad, I think. I don't know, my Clone Wars lore isn't really up to scratch these days. 3 resource in aggression and heroic traits. It's a 4/4 with raid 1, so definitely punching above its weight in terms of its cost, but there is downside. When played, an opponent creates 2 battle droid tokens. So 2 of these 1/1 villainous droid tokens immediately appears on your opponent's side. And I like this kind of design in terms of giving us an above rate unit that has some kind of built-in downside. We're seeing this happen in red specifically. It's the risk-reward color. We see the same thing in Magic the Gathering. I just think that Jesse, in terms of what it's doing to the board state, going to lead to some feel bads. And I think in terms of what it's going to do to your games, it's probably going to be too punishing too consistently. Oddly enough, it's a clone, and so far what we've seen from the clones in the Republic all lean into this coordinate strategy where you want to have 3 units on your side of the board. But it actively helps your opponent get to coordinate before you do. In a Republic mirror match, this probably is just going to feel terrible. I mean, is it in the deck with Ahsoka? I mean, if you play a starter deck, Ahsoka versus Ahsoka, you're just always going to end up resourcing your Jesse. That kind of feels bad. And I just think in terms of what FFG is trying to achieve with this new meta, where the board state really does matter quite a lot, this probably isn't going to feel great to play a lot of the time. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be times where giving your opponent 2 1/1s just doesn't matter at all, and you've got an above rate unit and you just continue to curve out, play unit after unit, and you just sort of crush your opponent, and look, they've got a couple of 1/1s, but that's inconsequential in the scheme of things. Maybe in like a Sabine deck I can understand that, but overall I just don't think that's probably the best thing that deck can be doing. I also want to point something else. I was talking about in the last video exploit, the mechanic that allows you to sacrifice your own units to reduce the cost of these incoming units like the Hellfire tank and Asajj. And it's a similar kind of situation between these two mechanics, either giving your opponent more units to play with or taking away your units. They still represent some kind of a swing in your opponent's favor in terms of raw number of units on the board. The reason I don't think exploit is going to be as difficult to use as something like Jesse is because it's interacting with your own deck, your own cards, and your own board state. You can build around exploit, where with Jesse, you have to take it to a tournament and play against a bunch of different decks, and there's just going to be some decks where this just feels really, really bad against. Whereas when you're building an exploit deck, you're designing your deck around having the ability to defeat your own units. So like you can put in upside on defeat triggers, battle droids that make more battle droids, cards that resource themselves. I don't think there's a great pool of cards that do that just yet in the format, but I think there will be something powerful with that mechanic, even if you're just chucking in 1 or 2 exploit units in a deck that has a lot of good on defeat triggers that just wants to play aggressively. It just feels like there's going to be something there where something like Jesse, I think there's going to be better units that, are above rate that have downside. At least units that don't give you such consistently bad downside or such, randomly really bad downside. Okay, this next one I'm actually really, really interested in. This is Prisoner of War. It's a 4-cost cunning event. A friendly unit captures an enemy non-leader, non-vehicle unit. If the enemy unit costs less than the friendly unit, create 2 battle droid tokens, so 2 of the 1/1s. And this is interesting. It's slightly on the higher end in terms of events that say one of your units captures one of your opponent's units. We don't yet have in the game, or at least not revealed, an event that just any unit captures any other unit. There's always some kind of stipulation. But in terms of the overall value and flexibility, I think this is going to be one of the better ones, especially considering this format, and it seems like what FFG is pushing for in terms of meta play is your board state matters. It matters how many units you have on the board versus your opponent. Taking off one of your opponent's units and creating 2 more yourself, even if the unit that you removed is not great either, and it's got to be a lower cost than the unit you use it with. It just seems like great value. And more importantly, it's a good tempo swing. You can sort of play this and not treat it as hard removal. It's not just like a Vanquish or something like that. It's something that you can play sort of eke out advantage, keep your board state larger than your opponent's, which then in the late game you can either out aggro them or use an exploit trigger or something like that. It feels like this is nice and flexible. And the fact of the matter is, even if your opponent does play a massive unit, so long as it's not a vehicle, you do have hard removal. Yes, 4 resources for this kind of effect is a little overcosted in terms of what we're seeing right now, but that's pretty decent as a fail case. Okay, well, realistically, the actual fail case of this is your opponent only plays vehicles, but I doubt that's going to be too much of an issue. Again, it'll be interesting to see whether vulture droids and like tri-fighters are treated as vehicles. They're technically not in the Star Wars universe. We haven't had any of those revealed just yet. They're technically just droid. If there's a way for ground units to capture space units, currently this is able to capture any non-vehicle, so a space or ground unit can capture what is ostensibly going to be most of your opponent's ground units. If there is any non-vehicle space units, it means you're going to be basically crossing over both arenas in various situations. And that's just going to make this card even more flexible. One more thing I want to say as well. This is uncommon. That is fantastic. It irks me a little bit when I see what could potentially be staple removal in rare and legendary. I think in terms of what keeps a card game healthy is not sort of sticking those things behind a paywall. Keep the staples in the game at a lower rarity, and we want like rare and legendary cards to be the big splashy things that you build decks around. Stuff like this in Uncommon's fantastic, and hopefully that's the trend that we keep seeing. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to help join in the conversation, please jump on my Discord, where I've been chatting about Star Wars Unlimited, the future of X-Wing, and where that's going with the XWA and all that stuff post AMG support. Speaking of which, the next video on the channel will be talking about the 2.0 format and the various rule sets within. We're going to have like a couple of discussion pieces on the various rules within 2.0 and 2.5 and their merits within the game and what we should be looking for moving forward. We do already have a bit of information in terms of what the XWA wants to do moving forward, but I still think it's sort of worth collectively looking at all these different pieces of rules and just clarifying for some people, whilst also, giving myself an opportunity to give my opinion, because I think this is all very, very interested, and what we're seeing out of the XWA is very, very positive. So yes, plenty more to come on Star Wars Unlimited and X-Wing. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.